Welcome to Early Childhood and the Bible, where I empower Christian parents to reclaim their God-given role as primary spiritual leaders and educators of their children. I'm Ann Livingston, an early childhood educator of over 20 years and a lover of Jesus and His Word, and I'm here to come alongside you with biblical encouragement and practical tools so you can lead your children's hearts, minds, and spirits with confidence. In a world that's pulling hard for your child's attention, you have been entrusted by God to shape their faith, their values, and their worldview. Here you'll find simple ways to weave discipleship into your everyday life, model a vibrant walk with Jesus, and guide your children into their own relationship with Him. You don't need a degree, a perfect home, or all the answers, just a willing heart and the Word of God. Let's take back the role God has entrusted to you and raise up the next generation to love Him and live for Him. So today I'm going to talk about choosing curriculum and what that looks like, the process that I'm going through with one of the homeschool families that I'm tutoring and really mentoring, and why I like certain types of curriculum and why I don't like other types of curriculum. I will probably reference some curriculums. This is just my own personal and professional take on it. And I wanted to share a little bit about like some of the struggles that I see. So the family that is homeschooling their children and chose a curriculum. It's been interesting to walk through that with them because, obviously when I was a teacher in the public school system, I was just given curriculum, right? Like when you're a teacher, you're told what curriculum you're going to use. And I found that when I was teaching certain things, I would often bring in supplemental lessons, or I would look at the skill that was being taught, and maybe I didn't necessarily like the lesson or the activity, but I would take the concept or the skill that was being taught, and then I would write my own lesson plan to still teach that same concept. And so that's obviously a lot of what I do in tutoring also is I look at the standards, state standards and national standards. I look at what's called the scope and sequence of a certain curriculum or even a certain grade level. And when I'm working with students who are in the public school system, if they're not understanding a concept and I'm realizing it's because of the way that it's being taught or the way that it's even being presented within the curriculum, I take that same skill, I take that same concept, and then I teach it in a different way to be able to help it land with that child, right? So it's been interesting to walk through it with the homeschool family because this is my first time working one-on-one with a homeschool family. And, they obviously chose their curriculum before I came in. And so they are working with the curriculum, The Good and the Beautiful. And I didn't know anything about it. I honestly don't know a ton about the homeschool curriculum. So that has been a learning curve for me. But I was working with kind of what they already had. They had the language arts curriculum, and then they also have the math curriculum. And so what I ended up doing was bringing in some of my own language arts and reading activities and then using some of the math curriculum. But I really wasn't using much from the teacher's manual of the language arts. And I finally asked the mom, do you mind if I take the teacher's manual and spend a week with it and just to be able to kind of see how it's laid out, how it's structured and all of that? And she said, yeah, sure, that's no problem. So I took it and I started looking through it and I found it to be confusing. Now, I will say that anytime you're working with any kind of curriculum, there's always going to be a learning curve. So especially if you are homeschooling your kids, have some grace for yourself, because if you didn't write the curriculum, then it takes a minute to kind of grasp how things are set up and how to teach certain things. And so I understood that there's a learning curve with any curriculum. So I was trying to give even myself some of that grace when it comes to using the language arts curriculum. But I found myself just consistently kind of hitting this brick wall of just not understanding why certain things were being taught. And for instance, I would see that this first grader, there were all of these gaps that I noticed. And so I was trying to fill in the gaps, but then even within that, there were skills that she had learned months prior, but now months down the road, there wasn't mastery anymore. And so, her mom and I were trying to figure out, like, why is this happening? If she's mastered the skill before, then it should still be mastered months down the road. There shouldn't be a regression there. And so I came back to the mom with the curriculum and I just said, I find it overwhelming. And if I find it overwhelming as an educator, I can only imagine how you feel without having a background in education, trying to teach your daughter from this. I said, there are a variety of curriculums that I've used in different states across different grade levels. And I will say the reading curriculum that I loved the most was from a school that I was teaching at in Florida. The curriculum is Success for All, and it's in a lot of Title I schools. I really liked it. Unfortunately, they won't sell it to private tutors. I've tried. I've emailed. I've tried. They won't sell it to private tutors. And so it's a shame because it's a really good curriculum. My students made really good progress using that curriculum. And so I was trying to find something that was comparable to that. Otherwise, I was like, I might just have to even write my own stuff. The other issue that I have with the good and the beautiful, if you are a Christian homeschool family, my understanding is that it was written by, like, it has Mormon authors. Now, does that really matter? Well, it depends. It depends on if you're looking for a faith-based curriculum, which I haven't seen a lot of. Like the leveled readers, for instance, aren't faith-based that I could tell in the glance that I got. There were things that I thought were a little off, like bringing in certain cultures and even like the beliefs of those cultures definitely wouldn't align with the Christian faith. I think that you have to be careful with some of those things. Now, granted, if you choose a curriculum that isn't a faith-based curriculum, then you may get that anyway. And of course, if your child is in public education, they're going to get that anyway. So you have to have a really solid biblical foundation in how you're leading your children at home. And I'm not saying don't teach your children about other cultures. I think that there's value in teaching that, but make sure that it always comes back to what does the Bible say as far as, things that we celebrate, things we don't celebrate, things we do, things we don't do, and so on and so forth. But the other thing that I noticed, and I don't know, like for instance, I don't know what the kindergarten curriculum looks like for the good and the beautiful, but in the first grade curriculum, I didn't see a solid phonics and phonemic awareness structure. So kids especially at that age need a lot of repetition, and there are certain skills that are expected in first grade and even kindergarten that unless you're pulling in additional activities, you're not going to get like the constant repetition that I think is really useful when it comes to developing some of those skills. So for those of you who don't know what kind of some of the educational jargon is, I know that some of the families that I work with, they're like, Anne, I talk to the teachers and they're throwing all of these words and I have no clue what they mean. And it is a little surprising. I find even the teachers are using these terms with the students. I don't think the students honestly need to know what all of this stuff is, but I understand that if you're a parent that hasn't been educated in this, and of course, depending on what your age is, you probably didn't even have it, like your teachers weren't telling you that this is what it is, but this is what it is. And also understand that education kind of is like a pendulum. It swings back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So it's like sometimes the teaching is going to be more phonics based, and then other times it's not. And right now it's heavily into phonics. I think that there's a lot of value in phonics. I think that especially when it comes to writing, there's obviously a correlation between reading and writing and one strengthening the other. And so if a child is solid in their phonics and their phonemic awareness, they're going to be much more comfortable when it comes to sounding out words to write. So when we talk about phonemes are the individual units of sound. So for instance, the letter A would be considered a grapheme, but the sound A would be a phoneme. So the phoneme is the smallest unit of sound, ultimately, right? And then you have phonemic awareness. And part of what phonemic awareness includes is not only understanding that these certain letters, for instance, make sounds, which are called phonemes, but also having the awareness that, let's say, in the word cat, you have 3 phonemes, k, a, t, and also understanding that if I were to give the student the sounds k, a, t, they could blend it into the word cat. So part of phonemic awareness is blending and also segmenting, right? So blending certain words or certain phonemes into a word, and then also segmenting and hearing each individual phoneme. Now, do you need to know all of that? No, not necessarily. But I share that because not all curriculums are created equal. And so your child is going to be a much stronger reader if you have a curriculum that includes a really solid foundation of phonemic awareness. So in that, I obviously have been doing some research, and I have friends who are still in the school system. And so I've been asking them, hey, what are you using? What curriculum is out there now? A good friend of mine teaches in Mississippi. She taught with me in Florida. So she knew the curriculum that we used and that we both really loved. And so I asked her, hey, are you aware of another curriculum that would be similar to that I could purchase as a private tutor? And she said, so she gave me a couple options. She's now teaching 3rd grade, so she's not doing the same type of curriculum or even the same level of intervention that I would be doing, working with kindergarten and 1st graders and even 2nd graders. But she said, here are a couple examples of, or here are some names of some curriculum that other teachers in my school are using that they're really liking. And so I purchased one. I've been working with it. I don't find that it's super user friendly. Part of it also is just a matter of just being trained in it. But there's another curriculum called UFLI, UFLI, that comes out of the University of Florida, which is where I got my bachelor's and my master's. And the University of Florida is a great university when it comes to early childhood education. And now, obviously, I know that it's secular, and, so for sure there's going to be things that from a faith-based perspective, there may be a disagreement on certain types of content. But as far as the core of what's being taught, I looked at a sample lesson and I ended up purchasing the manual. It will be here this week. Once I get into it and am actually using it, then I can give better feedback as far as what I think of it. However, what I like about the sample lesson that I got, so it has under phonemic awareness, it gives examples and activities for blending and segmenting, right? So the teacher or the parent or the tutor, for instance, would say to the student, okay, here are the sounds, f-ish, and the student would have to say fish. Okay, sh, rush, sh, ip. Now, the skill that's being taught in this lesson is SH says sh, right? So we're going to see a consistency across the different examples and practice segments. And then to segment, so I would give the student the word shin, and they would have to break it down into sh, I, n. So there's multiple examples of that, right? And then that you have a visual drill. So on the board, or you could do flashcards, you're giving the graphemes or the letters, right? So I don't have a smart board to work with, or I don't even work with a tablet when I'm tutoring. So I would have flashcards. So, CK, K, FF would be the letter F, right? So you would show them as flashcards, and then the students have to go through giving the sounds of those graphemes. And then there's an auditory drill where I would give the sound k. The students would have, you could either have a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and they have to write down all of the letters or all of the graphemes that make the sound k. So they would write C, they would write K, and at this point in the lesson, they would also know CK also, right? So it gives them a greater range of all of the letters that make the k sound. They start to learn the different rules. So that's an example. And then the blending drill, again, this in the classroom, this is done on a board. If I'm working one-on-one with a student, I'm probably going to use either wooden letters, or that's what I use. I mean, you can also use letter blocks, but when I'm tutoring, I have wooden letters. So you could use magnetic letters also, right? There's all kinds of stuff. So for instance, I would say, okay, build the word sick, S-I-C-K. Okay, now turn sick into slick. And then they would, turn it into slick. Okay, now turn slick into lick. Take away the S. Now turn lick into kick. So it's like a blending chain. It's a chain of words that all they're doing is either adding a letter or removing a letter in order to build more words. And then you introduce the new concept, whatever the concept is. And then there's a reading practice. There's word work practice. And then they call them irregular words. They're also called sight words. In the U-Fly curriculum, they're called heart words. That's an interesting concept. So the way that they do sight words is so let's give an example. The word said, S-A-I-D. Well, it's a sight word because we need to know it by sight because you can't sound it out, right? So sight words are sight words because you can't sound them out. Now, the problem, though, is that some sight words you can sound out because they do follow the rules. But a lot of times, the sight words don't follow the rules. So the way that U-Fly has done it is they call them heart words because some of the in the words, part of the word follows the rule and part of the word doesn't follow the rule, and therefore you have to know it by heart. So the way that they would do it for said, under the S and the D, there's a square, and then under the AI, there's a heart. And that's supposed to give the visual cue to the student that the AI, they need to know it by heart because you can't sound it out. It doesn't follow the rule. But the S and the D, they do follow the rule, so those you can sound it out. Now, is it necessary? Not necessarily. I mean, I've been teaching for many years, and sight words are just sight words, and kids end up memorizing them, and they don't necessarily need to understand. However, you do have curious kids, like the little girl who's being homeschooled. She's been asking her mom, well, why does it follow the rule here, but it doesn't follow the rule there? So sometimes kids, they notice that, and then they get curious, right? And then in addition, there's a leveled reader text that follows the same spelling pattern or the reading pattern, the SH, the grapheme SH, sh. And so there's a continuity and a consistency between what they're learning in the phonemic awareness aspect of it, and then what that looks like when reading it as a leveled reader. And then there's an assessment piece, which you assess fluency. And so it's all encompassing. So like I said, I haven't had a chance to fully administer the curriculum, and use it. And I don't have data in front of me as far as my own personal data of what I've seen and how I've seen it work with students. But I can tell you that from what I have used before and what I have seen in the repetition and the consistency, and even just students knowing what to expect, there's a lot of value in having a curriculum like this. Now, again, it's more of a phonics-based curriculum and not necessarily a holistic language arts curriculum. So I think that there's some value in having some additional language arts aspects to it. But the thing is, if students don't get a really strong grasp on the phonemic awareness, they're going to struggle much longer when it comes to reading. So you just want to have a really strong foundation in that. I've also had a couple parents look into the program All About Reading. I don't have a personal or even a professional opinion on it. I have looked at a sample lesson. I have watched a couple videos online. The parents who love it, they love it. My initial take is that I think it potentially could still be a bit overwhelming. There's still a lot of components to it. Now, I will say from what I've learned, it sounds as though in the teacher's manual, it says only do 20 minutes a day. So it takes multiple days to get through a lesson. There's some value in that, right? In like keeping it short and sweet. Now, if you find a curriculum that you're using and it's easy enough for you to implement and your kids love it and they're thriving and they're making progress, great. Like, I do not believe that there is just a one-size-fits-all curriculum. I don't, because every child learns differently, and what may work really well for one child, another child may struggle with. So I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm not sponsored by any curriculum. Like I said, when I was in the classroom, I was just told what to teach. And now that I'm working with a homeschool family, and my hope is to continue to work with other homeschool families. And I have friends who homeschool, and so I'm learning a lot about the homeschool world and what that curriculum looks like. And it's fascinating to me. I love curriculum. I worked when I was teaching in Houston. I actually worked with the Houston Independent School District, and I worked with them on writing a language arts curriculum. So I have experience in writing language arts curriculum. This is not reading related or language arts related, but at my first church, I was working in the special needs ministry, and I worked on writing a Bible curriculum. So I love curriculum. I'm fascinated by how people think to put certain things together, and what may seem logical to one person or a team of people putting together a curriculum may not make sense or may not seem logical to someone else, even if they're following the same scope and sequence, right? So like I said, I'm not sponsored by any curriculums, so I don't get a kickback from anything. I am still learning the different things that are out there, because I have a lot more freedom now to be able to research curriculum and use the curriculum that I do like and don't use the curriculum that I don't like. But I also want to help educate parents on certain things to look for and why certain things may be really helpful, and then certain things may be overwhelming to both them as the teacher and the student as the learner. So I hope that helps. If you have a curriculum that you really love, please message me, Ann at faithfulfoundation.co. Let me know what it is, why you like it, anything you want to share, even if you want to send me, I don't know, pictures or like a little video of flipping through it or whatnot. I like I said, I love curriculum and I love learning what's working. And I can always benefit having more information and other resources to be able to share with parents. So I'm learning from you often as much as you're learning from me. So have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you next week. If this episode blessed you, please subscribe, comment, and share it with another parent who is trying to raise godly children in an ungodly world.